The Smithsonian American Art Museum has two oil paintings on display from the 1930s that are suggestive of the chaotic way of life at that time. Isaac Asimov, a 20th century American writer, stated that no one can possibly have lived through the Great Depression without being scarred by it. In the 1930s, American citizens were dealing with the recent economy crash in 1929 and the looming forewarnings of World War II. As a way to express this trauma almost everyone was experiencing, artists began to rethink their American identities through their art. Society was changing for women, immigrants, and the American melting pot was becoming more prominent. For instance, feminist Georgia O'Keeffe's 1932 oil painting Manhattan and the Italian-born Joseph Stella's 1936 oil painting Metropolitan Port displays a new patriotism created by utilizing geometric forms, cool colors, and symmetry to indicate the modern American culture, which included the formation and increasing use of skyscrapers in cities. The construction of the Chrysler Building concluded in 1930 and was the first building in the world at that time to be taller than 1,000 feet. The construction of the Empire State Building concluded in 1931, the beginning of the rise of tall and taller buildings. O'Keeffe and Stella's paintings take a more melancholy, abstract approach to the concept of a city, using cool color palettes of blue and white. The growth of industrialization was becoming apparent. Manhattan and Metropolitan Port were both painted during the 1930s, a time where people were suffering through the Great Depression as well as a time period that was sandwiched between two world wars. Although the Great Depression technically ended in 1933, the urbanization that came with World War II is what really got America's economy back on its feet. One method that artists at this time used to help formulate a more renewed national identity after the collective war devastations involved painting subjects from home. People were questioning the old, traditional way of doing things that led to war, including using art as propaganda, resulting in the utilization of alternate visual techniques and subject matters. In the 1920s, Georgia O'Keeffe was among some of the first Americans fortunate enough to live in a skyscraper in New York. This experience influenced her to create the soaring heights of Manhattan, accompanied by O'Keeffe's recognizable use of vibrant colors. She is well known for her many depictions of New York skyscrapers as well, but Manhattan mirrors the concrete jungle that was becoming a sought-after destination for artists, immigrants, and other creatives. O'Keeffe's paintings resemble vorticism. In class, Professor Wood taught us that it is nearly impossible to separate an artwork from the time period it was made. Current events and culture are always reflected in some manner or the other, so it is important to note that in addition to Manhattan, Joseph Stella's Metropolitan Port also reflects the growth of metropolitan cities in the 1930s, although created a few years later. Stella was an American artist with roots going back to Italy. The perspective that his Italian heritage afforded Stella led him to develop his distinctive depiction of industrialization in the United States based on color and lines. His emphasis on line in his painting originates from his own personal American experiences. His views of the Brooklyn Bridge, including the various lights and their apparent hues and movements. Artists normally involve lines in paintings to guide the viewer's eye along a specific path. O'Keeffe forms jagged vertical lines that come together to make diagonal-shaped buildings. This creates proud, warm overtones, while the lines featured in Stella's Metropolitan Port creates an atmosphere of rhythm and movement. There is an emphasis on vertical and horizontal lines in both paintings, but Stella included spiral curves and zigzag lines in Metropolitan Port. Manhattan is full of variously shaped rectangles. Stella directs his audience's gaze hypnotically, drawing the eye towards the center, with contrast between the spirals at the bottom of the painting and the horizontal skyline and vertical buildings above that. The colors of the cityscape appear to glow radiantly, reminiscent of the cathedrals of Gothic Age Italy, Stella's origins. Horizontal lines encourage feelings of rest and quiet in viewers. The Art Institute of Chicago Museum published that, at the same time, other artists reinvigorated the revolt against representational style, championing non-objective art as a form that spoke deeply to modern concerns. The Park Avenue Cubists continued to evolve a European-based abstraction, and modernists such as Stuart Davis and Charles Demuth applied a precise geometric vocabulary to American architecture and advertising. Inclusively, the color arrangement of the paintings are actually unalike from each other. O'Keeffe created the main subjects of Manhattan, the buildings, to be upright but slanting. They are overlapping, both confined and flowing at the same time. She uses a light shade of blue for the sky and white for the buildings, but there's also pink, black, and plum. Art culture in the 1930s did not see many women creating paintings of buildings. This may be part of O'Keeffe's incentive in using her trademark 3 flowers. The color palette Stella created for Metropolitan Port is simpler in number but more fragmented in arrangement. The deep blue splashed in the sky and the black acting almost as a stabilizer throughout the painting, repeated luminescent white lines as well as another white building, elicits an intense emotional reaction in viewers. As far as light is concerned, both Manhattan and Metropolitan are bright in their own manners. Where Manhattan is bright overall, Metropolitan has streaks and strips of brightness that separate the darkness. These attributes that contribute to this ephemeral effect are pale, silvery white colors the artists use. O'Keeffe's Manhattan is more influential by shape and form. Stella's Metropolitan Port is more influential emotionally through pigment and also geometry. Manhattan and Metropolitan Port are 2 early 20th century paintings that are exemplary illustrations of the political and economic strife of the effects of World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. O'Keeffe's Manhattan is a physical representation of the manufacturing boom, the development of skyscrapers using unique and modern techniques. Stella's Metropolitan Port is an artistic representation of New York that includes a skyline and with an iridescent theme. The cityscapes offer insights into the development of blooming mechanical age, and they are both on display at the Smithsonian American Art Museum.